Hello, so I just finished watching the documentary Growing Up Blind, which is about a boy who was born with glaucoma and wasn't able, to see. It just pretty much showed him, having to cope and learn how, without vision, learning how to do day-to-day tasks and become independent. And based on the documentary and other resources provided for the module, I'm able to go ahead and respond to, you know, the the following questions in the initial response prompt. So, the signs that practitioners should look out for that may indicate that a child has a visual impairment is is basically, if you can't see their eyes, that maybe the iris is cloudy. They bump into things a lot, based on the fact that they cannot see. They have crossed eyes, whether turned inward or outward, and are unable to focus on a specific, object that's moving or face whenever someone's speaking. That they're constantly rubbing their eyes, blinking, especially when there's no like bright light present, maybe frequent squinting, pupils that are on unequal sides, um, eyes that bulge and or maybe dance around, and sitting too close to a TV or or even having a book too close, avoiding tasks that require good vision, like maybe possibly like maybe going to the playground, running, playing tag, you know, it, stuff like that. Maybe even catching a ball, for example. So those would be some of the signs and characteristics, of visual impairments. Basically, like the visual problem just depends on the severity of the visual impairment. There are some students or children who are visual impaired that can see more or less than others with visual impairments. So it's just based on what kind of visual impairment they have. So it can be basically, you know, nearsightedness, farsightedness, are vision impairments, such as, when the eyes look in different directions and are not looking simultaneously, that can cause, them to not to be able to see maybe, possible, like light, colors, but they don't have a specific focus. When it comes to cataracts, they aren't able to see, uh, you know, most things at all. There are some, some of these visual impairments where they can see light and shapes, and others where they just can't see at all. So it just depends on the severity, the type of loss, and at the age the condition appears. There's some that are born blind, there's some that become blind over time, and the overall functioning level of the child. So if they have a multi disability, it's going to affect their learning as well as the visual impairment. So the educational needs of someone who is visually impaired, um, would possibly be, basically that they need to learn how to navigate with their four senses, excluding vision. This means that they gotta learn how to do things, with their sense of touch, their sense of smell, their sense of hearing, and even with motion as well. Just being able to feel things in movement, and even the sense of taste. So the students just basically gotta learn using their other senses, um, in order to become more independent. And this is something that, in the video Growing Up Blind, is what they were teaching the boy was basically, to use his, especially his sense of touch, to be able to feel, whether it was the globe in order to see, to feel like the borders of the countries, whether it was his cane in order to like feel around the location he was at, and just try to do basic essential life skills as well. So some instructional considerations that teachers should think about when it comes to having someone with who is if it visually impaired is just pretty much teaching them you know what is the teaching maybe students in the class, how to approach a student with visual impairment, how they can communicate with the student who cannot see, either by, having them introduce themselves since, while they're approaching so that, that they can recognize, the name of the speaker by the voice, you know, and also letting them know when they're going to leave, because student who can't see won't know, whether they left or not. Just common etiquette for the student who's visually impaired. Teaching social skills is very important for someone who is visually impaired. Being able to, even though maybe they cannot see either at all or just not a lot, being able to make, at least face the direction of the speaker, being able to maybe have some kind of expression, on their face, being able to do like some gestures in the way they interact, no, teach them how to properly use utensils and chew, when they're eating, and being able to interpret, some cues, when it comes to the tone of someone's voice, uh, and how they can properly respond. Other considerations would be, to be able to, provide specific kind of material for the student who is visually impaired, whether it be like providing materials that would be color and contrast, maybe for students who can see maybe colors and shape, and shapes, but not like able to focus. So giving like students like maybe something bright, like when it comes to, butcher paper, having dark letters and items on pale backgrounds, so it can be more easily viewed by these students. You know, have these high contrast, evenly spaced print. For these people, high contrasting colors. Being able to avoid clutter, visual clutter, making it simple for some of these students who maybe just can't see completely. Obviously, having Braille print, teaching them how to read Braille is one of the most important things to consider for teachers, since since most of them won't be able to actually visually see letters. So teaching them how to read Braille, providing Braille print, even how to write Braille, provide um, tactile items for them to be able to understand, such as I had mentioned, how they, caregivers of the boy in the Growing Up Blind, were able to, get him that tactile globe, being able to get him things, um, make him more aware of his other, surroundings based on touch. So whether it's art projects, science projects, giving him those tactile supplies, have a, even a Braille copy of like the rules, routines, and procedures for the students, maybe even a Braille copy of like notes for them to be able to review. Being able to make sure that everything is labeled in Braille when it comes to shelves, cubbies, lockers, any kind of material, and even tactile symbols that the children can easily identify that they can use. Obviously get them familiar to the classroom, and make sure that everybody in the classroom is also familiar that because the student is visually impaired, there cannot be clutter in the classroom. That chairs have to be pushed in the desk whenever the student is traveling around. That everything should be in order as the student knows it. And there's no obstacles that will cause the student to be able to trip or fall, or maybe become confused in his location. Just and have them familiarize themselves with the layout of the school, and even fire drill procedures. Um, Another thing is just the supports and services that they would probably possibly be provided based on their level of visual impairment, would be to get a specific therapist on orientation and mobility. So these O&M specialists would teach the student techniques about moving around safely and independently, just like the boy was doing in Growing Up Blind, where he had his specialist, try to get him from point A to point B, whether it was like the farmer's market to the post office, the post office to another area in town that he's familiar with, and they teach them how to be more aware of their surroundings using their cane in order to do that. Other possible, supports and services that students with visual impairments would get would be therapeutic recreation. So pretty much evaluating this therapist would evaluate the child's functioning during their free time, their recess time, and provide programs, that in order to help him with proper like body movement, including running on a track, you know, maybe participating in recess in some sort of way. School health services will also be a, a specific service that would be provided by the school. The school nurse or other staff would obviously be doing vision and hearing screenings on the student who's visually impaired, and make sure that they're constantly being able to check up on the student, and maintain current medical records. Transportation services would also be, provided by the school under IDEA. Specialized equipment may be necessary to help, transport the students based on their safety. Maybe they'll possibly have ramps or some sort of lift, depending on the child's mobility, along with visual impairment. And obviously, uh, last and not least, they would also have something called rehabilitation counseling, which is basically like counseling that would help them, with their independence, narrow down on, just getting them to figure out, what kind of employment or career they want, and focus down on what their goals are. So as far as instructional, and environmental accommodations and modifications that um, need to be used, would it be assistive? I'm sorry, would be obviously just like I said before, providing the student like with print and braille. I always want to make sure that the students able to learn, through other methods other than vision. So this would obviously be, based on presentation, presenting it in a different format, which would be braille. how they respond. They could respond in Braille, they could respond orally, the setting, the students, depending on how their cognitive ability, that would be either placed in an inclusion setting or in a special education setting where they're with a special education teacher, depending on their ability, you know, and obviously with timing and scheduling as well. But some of the modifications for some of these visual impairments would be, just shortened reading and writing assignments, textbooks, based on a different grade level curriculum, but at students, reading level, test questions read and explained to the student, and they can allow the student to respond using a preferred mode, which would either be orally, maybe using some kind of assistive technology, which would be speech to text, in order for them to be able to write out the response, or even writing out in Braille. That would be up to what the student would have. Obviously, having contrast enhancing aids, such as, having tactile ways of them to be able to learn, having writing supplies that are high contrast, such as dark felt tip pens for completing written assignments, large print textbooks, handouts and worksheets, magnified materials, you know, increased proximity to print materials, so making sure that they can be able to see it as close as possible. Glare reduction devices, textbooks in Braille. So those are some of the visual, like instructional accommodations that they could use. Transcribing print materials, so into Braille, so they could write in Braille. They can make tactile representations. They can also, be able to, use three-dimensional models to help them out, pretty much visualize whatever presentation is being, presented to the rest of the class, providing actual hands-on objects versus having pictures provided, to them. Having maybe tactile charts and models, and for the student to be able to feel and understand. Auditory accommodations would include, having audiobooks, having the teach, having them being able to record the teacher's lesson in order, instead of taking notes, they can just pretty much have a tape recorder and record it. Having the student being able to respond with tape recordings instead of having to write them out. Have audio disc. Whenever presenting a picture, that teachers are able to pretty much describe, orally what the picture looks like for the student to have a better idea of what is being, looked at. Descriptive videos, that the student will be able to have a better idea about. Those are some, and obviously for assignment and testing accommodation, there'll be, extended time with frequent breaks. Schedule will be, obviously specific, depending on the student's cognitive ability. We can allow the student, to respond to tests, in different ways, whether it's Braille, recorded response, tape recording, and they would also be able to use assistive devices for their assignments and for their tests as well. Those assistive technology could include what I had already mentioned, speech to text, as well as enlarged text, handheld magnifiers, video magnifiers, Braille, digital text, bold felt tip markers, adaptive paper, digital recorders, canes, and GPS devices, which can help them, determine their location, where they're at, and where they have to go. Um, Other considerations, and this I remember from that documentary, to help prepare learners with visual impairments, for the post-school transitions is pretty much, having them, try to do things themselves, become more independent, try not to let them get too much help, have them really try to frame an idea of what they want to do when they get older, so they can already start preparing for that kind of transition at an early age, so they know what they're expected to do, and just make sure that even though it is frustrating and they may feel excluded, just be there also for the emotional support, um, and having them, you know, try to be able to be understanding in how they're feeling and their frustration of not being able to do things that normal kids can do, but that they can just do just as well, you know, and be just as competent.